such as sustainability, the social aspect, and the contribution with knowledge and science that we'll talk about in this panel. So, for the first talk, I'd like to call Ali Zogby, Mr. Ali Zogby, to share his thoughts and share his vision of the dynamics of this market under the perception of a big specialist who's working for so many years in this market. So I'd like to greet you all with the Islamic greetings. May the peace be with you all. That in Arabic is Salam Alaikum. So in the moment that we are living in, I'd like to greet you. Wishing you peace would be a obligation of any human being. So Silvana, thank you very much for introducing me. I'd like to greet you all, Esteban, Lais. So this topic is a very important one when we talk about trade. And it's also a very relevant topic when you talk about Brazil and Africa. The Muslim population, it was said, is a population that is growing at a birth rate that is a very big one. We have the expectation of reaching half of the world's population in 2100. Islam is not a monolithic block. It is actually, it has variations considering cultural, historical, sociological influences that we can find in different populations. Africa has almost half of its population with people that are Muslim. So what is halal? So what is the meaning of this principle that actually is a Islamic principle? It comes from the Islamic tradition, and it states what is licit. That's a very subjective word, but what is licit is what provides
what's allowed, permitted,
what is related to human being. So in terms of what you eat, what you dress, in media, finances, whatever is provides dignity to human being can be considered as licit or lawful. So if when I produce food, it has to consider preservation of the environment. Working relations might not be analog to slavery. You have to consider animal welfare and also consider that that is beneficial to human health under all aspects. So logistics and labor contracts, all this is part of this halal seal. So this population has a religious guidance to consume this kind of product or service that has this halal seal or stamp. So there is no way to see that this is a market that is not only a market for the present and for the future as well. So what we notice is that we have basically the whole Africa consuming halal. People with Islamic minorities are requesting halal certification, which means that the virtue of halal is that it comes from a religious tradition, but it's no longer a religious aspect for a long time, becoming a benefit to human beings, universally speaking. Like countries with Islamic minorities are consuming halal in all over the world. So Brazil is the first world producer and exporter of halal protein. To give an idea of this whole story, imagine this. In 1976, there was the first export of halal animal protein to the Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, 650 tons. We had to have a pool of companies, and those companies were able to export 650 tons of food. In 2021, we had 2,374,000 tons. So Brazil is an important player to provide halal food for different countries. So when we talk specifically about Africa, we have to understand the needs we have in terms of food security. So Brazil is very important so that this relationship can evolve, so that we can also meet the need of food security. And to finish my talk, so how can we get this halal stamp? The process requires a validation and accreditation process with certain rules, and once those rules are met, a certifying agency can issue this halal certificate, which goes beyond food aspects. It is related to Islamic financing, tourism, fashion, pharmaceutical products, cosmetics, media. So halal is all about a lifestyle, and the positive aspect of that is that it is in total synergy with ESG principles. So to be ESG, theoretically speaking, those who have halal stamp already have the necessary access to be considered ESG compliant. So I'm here. We're going to talk a little bit more later about this market in more details. And with regards to Africa, we shall consider this market in the evolution of the relationships between African countries and Brazil. Okay, thank you very much. Now I'd like to call your attention to the size of this food market. So now we will hear Lais. We have a consumption of halal beverage and food that is around $2 trillion, and it's growing. Only in Africa, this market in 2022 was $78 billion, and it must reach $123 billion in 2027. So I'd like to introduce you Lais. So tell us, Lais, about the work of a BPA. Hi, good afternoon. First of all, thank you for having me here and the space for the Association of Animal Protein, and thank you, Mr. Ali. The work of the association, among many areas where we operate, one of the biggest one is the promotion of international commerce, providing support to the whole productive chain to export. And one of our biggest areas in the productive chain are the halal certificators, which play a very important role. 40% of our exports of birds meat are halal based. We started in 1970s with the first shippings to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, and at that time we exported just a few containers, but throughout the years Brazil were becoming increasingly more specialized in halal certification, becoming leader in those exports today. We serve over 50 countries, and recently we got the opening of a very important market in north of Africa, which is Algeria, and with the support of the Ministry of Agriculture and Foreign Affairs, we could open this market for us, so we see a very prosperous future, especially in the north of Africa. Thank you, Lace. In 2022, Brazil exported $8 billion to African countries. I mean, halal exports. And this represents, regarding 2021, an increase of 35% in the volume, in the total volume of exports. But we still have a number of opportunities that are still not explored in this market. From the standpoint of new businesses, Estevan, how can the Arab-Brazilian Chamber of Commerce can contribute with companies to access those markets? Thank you. Good afternoon, my colleagues in the panel. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm so glad to talk about two very important topics for me. One is halal and the other is Africa, a continent who has welcomed me so dearly during 3 years of my life. Very quick comments about what is halal in Africa. And I think it's important to share this perspective that many times people are not so much familiar with. When you look at the African country as a land of opportunities, it's very evident, as it was already said, that it represents 20% of the world's population. That's the youngest population in the world, a very dynamic one. They're becoming increasingly more urban. They are hungry for urbanization. But maybe the biggest mistakes of companies who are considering doing business with Africa is seeing the African country as a homogeneous country. It's not. It's a very diverse continent, and this diversity has to be understood. When you look at the African continent from the religious standpoint, you can categorize some minorities. When you look at Google Maps, you see Maghreb, Egypt are mostly Islamic, Sahel as well, the East Coast. You have some Muslim people, West Africa, mixed population, 50 Christians, 50% Muslims. And if you consider this map as your strategy to access markets or build partnerships, you're very likely to fail. And why do I say that? As Dr. Ali said, the demand for halal products is growing. And it's growing not only in countries that has the majority of Muslim people, but also in countries where we have the majority of Christian people. When you go to countries where you have a very good food service market, such as South Africa, the headquarters require that raw material is halal, even though 5% only of the South African people is Muslim. So this movement is happening throughout the whole African continent, including countries where the vast majority is Christian. Maybe because some decades ago, parts of the food importers that were there came from Lebanon or Indian, and this culture has became stronger, maybe. But the fact is that today the perception of quality from several communities in Africa, and if you are willing to work on the African continent, you have to consider that not only in regions that are basically Muslim, but also in the whole continent.
So the halal certification is not difficult to acquire. You need to understand the importance of it. You need to include it in your business strategy. And we have Dr. Ali representing FEMBRAS, and it's a very accessible process. Having that in mind, the Arab-Brazilian Chamber of Commerce has a project in partnership with Apex Brazil, which is called Brazil Halal Project. And some of the objectives are to find companies that are becoming global, but they don't have this halal certification. And so we give them support, not only financial support, but also with knowledge, and also to help promote these countries in the global scenario, especially countries where the scenario is important, more especially on the African continent. So I think that's the main message I would like to share with you, that the Hallal certification is a strategic tool for working, doing business in the African continent, and it goes beyond the obvious association with the religious aspect. And any businesses that are interested in investing in the halal market or becoming part of it and getting the certification, I would encourage you to contact the certifying entities or the Halal Brazil project. Okay, thank you very much. And as you said, the certification is a facilitating tool or strategy, and it also follows a global trend, which is digitalization. So now I would like Mr. Ali to tell us a bit about the innovation in the certification process and how this has been made easier with the use of digital tools. Well, that's a great question. As was already mentioned here various times, there's been a transformation of the consumers. The consumers' awareness is changing. Consumers have become much more demanding regarding many aspects. We understand that the technologies available today have led consumers in an intuitive way to search for some of these conveniences, and it wouldn't be any different in the halal sector. And so we had to give an answer to this movement. It's a movement of awareness, of the demand for a product that fulfills some of the criteria that those consumers have. So what we did was, well, in the past, the halal certification was carried out, or that certificate said that that product was produced in a specific way. However, with the evolution of both the technology and the consumers, we were required to come up with a system to address these new questions and these new issues that modern consumers have. So we decided to revolutionize the halal certification process, and Elu's blockchain is producing along with Eco Halal, and this new system will allow for the monitoring and tracking of all of the halal segments. There will be interaction with the consumers, with the logistics part, with the religious leadership. So it will include everyone involved in the chain here. You can have a QR code that you get across the ocean to track where the animal came, what the source of that food came from, what type of feed was used for that animal, what were the sanitary conditions used to care for that animal, how was that animal was transported, was the animal's well-being considered. And also the slaughter process is used to slaughter this animal in such a way that reduced its suffering. So all of these aspects are being considered, and also the labor conditions for the workers involved in the process. So you will be able to track basically online, and you'll be able to monitor and track each stage of the process. So the Brazilian halal products will have a lot of value added because of these innovations. This will be a plus for consumers that will besides having the guarantee of a halal product, but also they will be able to monitor and track every step of the process. And beyond that, they will also be able to, using this QR code that they will receive, also check the social responsibility that will be used, that will be benefited from part of the profits from the sale of that product. So how much, when you buy a halal product, will you be helping at a charitable organization or project? Thank you very much. Now, considering, Lais, the avícola, eu esqueci.
Birds.
So the other part, when we talk about chickens and turkeys, so when we're talking talk about statistics, in Brazil there are around 130 slaughterhouses for poultry, and about 105 of those have the halal certification, and there are many smaller ones that are in the process of acquiring the halal certification, and they are seeking new types of education and information. And so the Brazil Arab Commercial Chamber is a facilitator for the transmission of this knowledge, and this will open up the doors to new markets, not only in Arab countries or in the northern African area, which are in the majority are Muslim, but also markets in Europe and the United States, and also here in Brazil. We also do supply the Muslim community here in our internal market. Now, thinking about other opportunities, it is really true that Africa is the future, and we know that the population is growing exponentially, that the economic and social development is on the rise also. And so when you put all of these factors together, all of these variables together, we can see that Africa is a continent where businesses and companies are focused on, and many are, and we are considering the possibility of installing processing plants in different countries in Africa. And so out of all the continents around the globe, Africa is the one that we expect will have the greatest growth in the agricultural sector. Now, Estevam, I'd like you to please complement what Mr. Ali said about how technology can drive these the halal production. Well, technology has various effects on the way trade is done today. I'd like to point two main points out. One is the cost, and the other one is credibility. When we're talking about the halal market, we're talking essentially about trust and credibility. The certification that Dr. Ali Zogby mentioned, that's the credibility. It's sheer credibility. It's only valid if the people that receive that believe that it is true, that they can trust it. And so that's what we are seeking when we apply technology to the halal process in the halal system. Like the tracking, the monitoring, and in this process of what's being developed between the Arab Brazil Chamber of Commerce and the Eco Halal, we want to, I won't even say to take it into the future. It's the present. Consumers do want to have immediate access in a trustworthy way to know what they are buying, if that product is trustworthy or not. And the other aspect is cost and the time that's necessary. And that's where where the Elus blockchain platform comes in, which is also another initiative to speed up the exports of our halal products. So there is a platform or there's a module inside the Elos platform called Easy Trade, where businesses can have all the documents related to that shipment from the halal certification agencies or the government agencies. They can have all of that documentation on that blockchain platform that will be made available to the customs service at the country where that merchandise is being shipped to. So that will be available for the customs officials in the other country to analyze, and so this speeds up the process, saves days and also prevents the risk of having wrong documentation. The good news is that we are in an advanced stage of implementing this system, the Easy Trade system with Egypt, and we hope to be able to announce that it is finished very soon. We've been working with a customs agency in Egypt for quite a while on this. Thank you very much, Estevam. When I mentioned the size of the halal market of a little more than $6 trillion at the moment, but with the expectation of reaching $8 trillion in a few years, this amount includes many different types of products and services. And within this amount, we have tourism, we have entertainment, we have various categories of products and services that go along with the halal lifestyle, we could say, and that need to meet this criteria, and that could also include this certification in order to more easily access the halal markets around the world. So I would like Mr. Ali to talk about the trends for various categories of goods and services, and what are the ones that are already well established as halal goods or halal products and services that might be included in the FUNBRAS certification in order to access these markets. Well, we talked a lot about food and drink. We talked about 1 trillion or 1.5 trillion. In Brazil, we are still in the billions, not in the trillion sphere. So we still have a way to go to reach significant amounts. But when we talk about the Muslim segment and the Muslim finances and the Muslim financial system, it's very significant. When you talk about the money related to halal, in the Muslim finance system, we don't have the speculative aspect. Interest rate is not allowed within the Islamic financial system because money, the purpose of money is to dignify people, to produce goods through that. Money is a tool to reach that. So what needs to change? In Brazil, we need to have laws that are going to include, as the UK did, this type of investment. So these people that would like to invest in a halal manner would also have a certification. This is one segment that could be very significant. I believe that in Africa especially, this type of halal certification for this financial segment to invest in sustainable projects would be very interesting. And maybe we could see some bottlenecks being undone with investment, this type of investment. We're talking about tourism. We are in the Sheraton. This is the first Muslim-friendly hotel in Brazil. The Sheraton is the first Muslim-friendly hotel in Brazil. And this certification was just received recently through certification with FUNBRAS, our organization. And São Paulo will be the first Muslim-friendly state. So what is this Muslim-friendly term? Well, it's very simple. You're in a hotel where you are going to include the possibility of generating comfort to a Muslim tourists and guests. Besides the Bible, the Torah, you can have the Quran in the room. You might have a suite that's in the direction of Mecca, or you might have different halal foods being served in the hotel, maybe a prayer mat, things like that, or a small guide that we have already prepared to show where are the mosques in the city where you're at. So this is the halal tourism. How much money does that move around the world? $95 billion. How much of that does Brazil take advantage of? Very little. So we started this process as if it's still 1976. In terms of medication, cosmetics, of fashion, we're still starting this process with other industrialized manufactured products. So we are starting to develop this. Now, obviously, it's not the work to be done only by a certifying agency, but also by the public figures that need to understand, an understanding like APEX has, to support these segments that are just starting out. Organization like the Brazilian Arab Chamber of Commerce that understood the importance of halal and has supported great projects in this area. So these are examples of a few different projects that we have just started to invest in here. It's a two-way street, we could say. Any type of relationship, you have the two sides. So this could open up a variety of possibilities in African countries, people from Brazil going to visit these countries, and vice versa. And so we can, with the certification, halal certification for these segments, there are many possibilities that will be opened up. Yes, this is very interesting because tourism has the possibility to open up many other sectors: cosmetics, fashion, entertainment, food services. So there are many opportunities for businesses that will be generated by this. Now, thinking about the partnership between countries, I would like to ask Lais to comment on which of the poultry sectors there are possibilities for interaction or partnerships between Brazil and the African continent. Well, it's important to say that Brazil has partnered with many different countries in Africa for around 15 years already. So Brazil has done a lot of work based on supplying food for healthy foods that have the certification that each market requires. So there's the halal market, but each country has different criteria for the halal products. So Brazil has been learning how to improve its production processes to fit and meet these demands. And so talking about how Brazil and Africa could partner this. Brazil is the largest food producer, and so Brazil knows how to produce food. We have know-how in technology that's been developed especially for the poultry segment, for example. So I strongly believe that Brazil would be able to contribute to the local production in Africa.
Thank you, Lais. Steven, tell us a little about Hallal project in Brazil and how this project can support companies to have access to the consumption market, to the Islamic consumption market, especially in the African continent. It's quite simple. The step one is to see the opportunity. When you see the opportunity, the Hallal project in Brazil, which is a novel one, it was born to get companies and step-by-step guide them in this journey of the Halal certification, which is understanding the Muslim consumer and which are the opportunities you have even if the country doesn't have the majority of Muslim people. The target countries is not only in the Middle East. They have target countries, sub-Saharan countries, and South Africa is one of the target countries, as well as Egypt is. So my suggestion is understanding the opportunity, understanding that a halal certification can be interesting for your company, your group of investors. So look for the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce, and we can support you. I think it's important to say that when you have a product portfolio to offer to the market, if you have in your portfolio products that are non-halal, you can only sell them to non-Muslim people. Whereas if you have in your product portfolio halal products, you can sell them either to Muslim and non-Muslim people. There isn't any kind of rejection to halal products from non-Muslim people. So this way, this is a strategy to companies that are interested in expanding their businesses in Africa to have a halal certification of their products. Thank you. We are approaching the end of this panel, so I'd like to open for questions from the audience, if any. Any questions? No questions. Okay, so let's go to the final round. We have discussed about the market, and we got to the conclusion that there is a digitalization process in terms of halal certification and foreign trade, and we have the instruments of commercial promotions supported by ABPA from Ras Halal, the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce, to provide access to companies to the market, especially the African market, where the consumption of halal products is very big, considering that we have 30 countries where most of the population is Muslim in Africa. So before the scenario, there are opportunities to have other products and services. In this scenario, I'd like to ask Dr. Ali to make his final remarks. I'd like to talk about empathy. We talk about trade in the sense, in a technological sense, in a cold way, so to say. But you have to remember that there is a relationship between Brazil and Africa that is a deep one. We are the most multi-ethnical country in the world. We are proud of having in our social fabric this African influence in everything we do. That's part of our DNA. So, actually, to make this trade to flourish, I suggest that we can look at this process from a cultural standpoint, that we can establish deep bonds with that, especially because we have a historical need of doing this with Africa. The first movement of freedom that we had in Brazil was from some slaves in Bahia state. That's part of our history. Africa is part of our history. It is today, and it will always be. So to finish, I'd like to express the need of this cultural proximity and the empathy, synergy that we have with this wonderful people, which is the African people. This will make us flourish increasingly more in this trade relationship. Thank you very much for your point. Internationalization promotes cultural proximity. So all of us shall consider that. Lais, your final remarks, please. The role of ABPA to foster international businesses. We have been working increasingly more to open new markets, especially in the north of Africa, where you have several barriers when you talk about Nigeria and Senegal. So I believe we need to get closer from the cultural and diplomatic standpoint so that we can take this work from Brazil, which is helping the food security of the world. Okay, thank you. Esteban, your final remarks. Synergy between Brazil and Africa and the possibility are infinite, but I still think we shall get to know each other better. We need to be even more connected. Thus, I'd like to congratulate Brazil-Africa Forum in a person of Professor Bosco. Those initiatives are quite necessary after the pandemic. The direct flights are coming back. We need to fly more both ways, and thus notice and know consumers and the opportunities that we have through the example that we had about Hallal or any other diverse features of all this diversity that we have in the African continent as well as we have in Brazil. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation. And thank you to the audience. Thank you, the Institute Brazil Africa. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to share with you all. And I hope to see you all again. I hope to be invited again to share the vision of the Arab-Brazilian Chamber of Commerce and our initiatives together with all the institutions to allow the intensification of businesses between Brazil and African countries. Thank you very much.